I'll just introduce myself first, seeing that I'm unmuted here. I'm Maureen Smith. I'm calling in from Canada, and I'm one of the citizen members of the Evidence Synthesis Infrastructure Collaborative, which you'll hear us referring to as ESIC, because it's a very long name. It's so we've abbreviated it, but that's what it stands for. And I'm really pleased to be here with you today and have this conversation with you to the first of a 3-series webinar. And John will introduce himself, and then we're going to get started. We have a lot of background to cover a little bit today, so I hope you're not discouraged and thinking that we don't want to hear from you as much as we do, because we do, but it's difficult for people to engage meaningfully without an understanding of the project. And I'm going to tell you that the project is quite complex, and figuring out what exactly they're doing took me a little while. So hopefully after today, you'll have a better idea of what it is that they're trying to do, but most importantly, how you can contribute to the whole process. So over to you, John.
Great. Thank you very much, Maureen. My name is John Levis. I'm based at McMaster University, and my role with ESIC is as an advisor to the Wellcome Trust. The Wellcome Trust is a UK-based charity. It announced in September of last year a £45 million investment to kickstart the Evidence Synthesis Infrastructure Collaborative, and its chief executive officer, along with the chief executive officer of the Economic and Social Research Council, have committed to bring hopefully at least 12 other funders to the table to support this new collaborative. And what we're going to be talking about today is an opportunity to shape the future of this collaborative, but also to get you thinking about how it may be useful to you in the future. As Maureen said, this is a somewhat complex initiative, and it's also hard to find the right language that works for different people. By our count, there are 12 different categories of what we've called interest holder. Citizen leaders, people working in citizen serving or citizen-led non-governmental organizations are one of those 12 categories. Maureen and I think they're among the most important category. And this is the beginning of a conversation about how do we find a way to talk about this exciting new opportunity in a way that's understandable to people so that they can then contribute to shaping it. So I'll turn it back to you, Maureen, if that's okay. And shall I go to the first slide? Oh, you're on mute, Maureen.
There we go. Okay, we'll give you a chance in a moment to try to introduce yourselves and in the chat, and also to fill out a poll to tell us what hat you're wearing today and what perspective you're bringing. But this is really a webinar series of three webinars, one this month, one in May, one in June. I'll give you some more details about that. But our focus is really to listen to people who are working with or are members of citizen serving and citizen-led non-governmental organizations, and for citizen leaders, individual citizen leaders, and may not have an affiliation, but really to share your insights and how we can better learn from others around the world. Very exciting global project, and we're hoping that you'll be able to join us for all 3 sessions. All of your insights from the webinars and from the survey that we'll send out will really contribute to shaping those the development of this ESIC roadmap that is being developed to really create that step change improvement. And so our voices are extremely important, and it really focuses on evidence synthesis, especially our AI, artificial intelligence enabled living evidence synthesis. So what we're developing is, key messages and a document that we will circulate next week that will include these citizen perspectives and to be presented at a consensus meeting in Cape Town at the end of June. We have made a little video, which you're welcome to listen to, welcoming you and talking a little bit about this incredible opportunity. So today, to get you really up to date on what's been happening since January, we're going to kind of describe this opportunity, catch you up on the process to date, and then prepare you for the process ahead so that you can meaningfully contribute your insights and to this work. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to launch the polls now. And if you want to add any more information about yourself in the chat, you're more than welcome to do so. So we'll start with the geographic region. Okay.
So all of you should be seeing a poll that popped up on your screen where there's a prompt about which geographic region are you located in.
Okay. That's very interesting. Okay, so of course, working globally, the biggest challenge is the time zone. So not surprising that we've got people where the time seems to work better for them.
And just in case you didn't see that bar chart, it popped up very quickly. So I think 2/3 of people were from Africa, roughly 1/3 from the Americas. And then
Right.
Euphrasia has put her name in the chat box with a bit of an introduction. She's another one of the citizen partners involved in the Evidence Synthesis Infrastructure Collaborative. You'll see there she's from Cameroon. And then we have another colleague here, Lamesa Asefa from Ethiopia. And it would be great if others put their name and where they're based in the chat box. Maureen, do you want to talk about the second question that's up?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the poll went up. I'm just waiting for the responses to come in. So we have an idea a little bit of who's here. There was supposed to be one that said just like unaffiliated citizen leader. I don't see it there. So maybe that's people are using the other. Wow. This is great. Got really good representation from different groups. I see the researchers, they're always gung-ho. They're leading the way. You can always count on them to show up to these meetings. So welcome to everyone. Just there, yeah. Then when you put a call out for comments, researchers are good on those too. So that's great. Really good to see that variety. John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the ESIC initiative is kind of, we talk about global south and global north, and for all the members, is it about 50% representing each group?
I think in the working groups, roughly 60% of the members are from the global south, and currently for our roster of invitees to the Cape Town meeting, the percentage is roughly comparable. And I probably should have said at the beginning that one of the ambitions of ESIC is to see leadership and execution in this space of helping us better learn from others around the globe and how those findings vary by groups and contexts. It really wants to support a transition in leadership and execution to the global south. So unfortunately, today you're seeing two faces that are not reflective of that future, but there are many, many leaders from the global south that are playing key roles, and we hope that we'll see them more and more leading these briefings and taking on more and more of the power to shape the future of ESIC.
Okay, thanks, John. So great to see that representation. As someone commented, they could tick several boxes. Yeah, that's always an issue because you know, at the end of the day, we are also all citizens, but we're maybe hoping that your perspective, maybe the hat that's closest to your head, is if you're piling them up like Dr. Seuss and they're up high, maybe the one closest to you. So, but we do recognize that people wear like multiple hats. So just to clear about the term citizens, which is a, you know, there, no matter what word we use, there's always a contentious side to language. So we use the term citizens and really to keep the focus on the individual and not to imply formal citizenship status determined by a government. So this includes, you know, undocumented individuals and Indigenous peoples who are sometimes forced to decline their Indigenous status to achieve citizenship. We looked into alternative terms like public or publics are often considered a group and not individuals. So I think that there's also more sector specific terms, and we're trying to stay away from those because this initiative is not just health focused, it includes all of evidence synthesis. So we're staying away from words that are also would be focused on one sector, like patients or people with lived experience. And so we've landed on citizens, and that's just wanted to clarify that should not eliminate anyone from the list. So,
And you
okay,
know,
next.
Maureen,
Yes.
something that just occurred to me, and this is perhaps a comment to Steve and James, I forgot to ask them to use worldly. So in future, we will be using worldly for simultaneous interpretation in the 6 official UN languages plus Portuguese. So you'll be able to listen and participate in these webinars in Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Portuguese, Spanish, and Russian. So my apology for that oversight today, but again, this is our first one. We're learning as we're going, and we'll be ready for the next time with Worldly.
Yes, learning as we're going. That's very true, John. It's been a steep learning curve. So just, you know, everyone's welcome here today, but our focus really is on how citizen perspectives can shape the work of ESIC. There are other webinars and surveys for people who wish to contribute to the ESIC work in other areas. So we're really interested in hearing the citizen perspective on the use of evidence in everyday life to help people make these informed decisions, and also you know, from citizen leaders and people working independently as leaders in their own right. So, but you're all welcome. But just to say that there are many opportunities to contribute to the work. This one is focused on how citizens can contribute to the work. Next slide. Just jump in anytime, John.
Yeah.
Okay, so as I mentioned before, there's 3 webinars in the series, and this is the first one, which is the one that's going to be the one where we probably do the most talking. We're hoping to really hand it over to you in webinar 2 to look at the key messages we'd like to contribute, and webinar 3, that roadmap that is being developed will have been a draft will have been published at that point. And then again, we will want to elicit messages that our citizen partners can bring to the Cape Town consensus meeting. So that's kind of the you know, the goal of the series. Of course, you know, we're hoping that you're able to come to all 3, but we understand that it doesn't work. So we'll also you know, be able to you can jump in wherever you can, and there'll be other opportunities to contribute through surveys and things like that.
And Maureen, I think we'll also be recording as we are today, so that if you can't make a particular webinar, we'll also send out the recording after.
Okay, I'm going to hand it over to John to give a little bit of background.
Great. Thank you very much, Maureen. And so this is where the complexity starts to come in. So we really welcome your feedback about how do we talk about this in a way that is more readily understandable to people. So the name of the initiative is the Evidence Synthesis Infrastructure Collaborative. As you heard Maureen say, we sometimes refer to it by its English acronym ESIC. And right now we're in the middle of a 6-month planning process. A planning process that began in January will culminate in a consensus meeting being convened in Cape Town, co-convened by the Pan-African Collective for Evidence and ACRES, the Center for Rapid Systematic Reviews. This 6-month planning process has been designed in a way that is equity centered. So I mentioned one of the real underpinning motivations is to try to support a transition in leadership and execution to the global south. But we've had a number of other diversity criteria that were front and center in all aspects of the design of the planning process, including who is selected for membership of the 5 working groups that we'll be describing shortly and the governance planning group. Those include things like language, gender, region of the world, early, mid, and later career, and a number of others. So equity has been front and center and will likely grow in visibility in our conversations as we move forward. It's also been participatory, so very often funders announce these big contributions, and then a couple of people, often in a large capital city in the global north, then design the approach to getting money out the door. But this has been designed to be a participatory process at the beginning, where these different categories of interest holder are being engaged in shaping what this looks like. So then the funding calls that follow can reflect these the collective wisdom of the different communities that are going to help to shape ESIC. And it's also being done in a way that's very transparent. So every document being produced along the way is shared immediately publicly. There are a number of open consultation periods. We also provide a tracking of what themes we heard from those consultations and whether and how we were able to act on them. When I think about the ESIC roadmap, I think about it first and foremost being about how do we harmonize efforts globally to make it easier to learn from others around the world. So each of us in our own country or our own province or state or our own community will bring many forms of evidence, a lot of other insights, including Indigenous ways of knowing, to thinking about how we do better in achieving societal goals in future. But one ingredient to that mix can be, what have we learned from others around the world, particularly people working in similar contexts to us or focused on serving groups similar to us. So ESIC is primarily about that. There's also opportunities through ESIC to reduce waste in primary research, so those studies that are conducted or those evaluations that are conducted, but also in what we call secondary research, so the synthesis of those existing studies and evaluations. ESIC will also help to document the impacts of research and evaluation. So this piece of the ESIC roadmap, it may be of less interest to some of you on the call, but it is one of the motivators for some of the categories of interest holder. I'll describe on the next slide what we mean by evidence synthesis, and in particular living evidence syntheses, but they are at the heart of this work. This conversation is happening in part now because there have been so many new developments in this space that'll allow us to envision a world where we have radically more timely, radically more relevant, radically more affordable evidence syntheses, and syntheses that put equity at the heart of helping us understand what we know and don't know. So Maureen's referred to the ESIC roadmap. It's currently being written with the input of 5 working groups, and I'll describe the focus of those working groups on the next slide, as well as the governance planning group. And that ESIC roadmap will always be live on a website as it progresses, but there are also very specific junctures in the planning process where people will be alerted that there has been a major new revision to the draft, and we would welcome comments on it. The penultimate version of the roadmap will be released on the 13th of June, and then that will be stress tested and refined at the consensus meeting in Cape Town at the end of June. I mentioned we have these 12 categories of interest holders ranging from UN agencies to government policymakers to science advisors to citizen partners on to researchers themselves and so on. But this conversation today, as Maureen has noted, is the beginning of a conversation about how do we make much more front and center in the thinking citizen-serving NGOs, citizen-led NGOs or non-governmental organizations, and citizen partners. You heard Maureen, some citizen partners are already involved in ESIC. We have Euphrasia on the line who's involved, as well as Maureen. There are others, but the people who are on this call, we hope will provide additional ways into communities who we need to hear from to shape ESIC. So this next slide just gets into some definitions. So if the term evidence synthesis is new to you, this is a way of identifying, so finding, selecting, appraising, and synthesizing the findings from all the studies around the world or all the evaluations around the world that have addressed the same question to arrive at an overall understanding of what we know, but also very importantly, how those findings vary by groups and how they vary by context. So the findings from Latin America may be quite different from the findings from Africa or Southeast Asia. So how do we learn from that variation so that people in a given country can draw on the evidence more likely to be relevant to them? I mentioned that one of the motivators for the issue of why now has been the emergence of this idea of living evidence synthesis. So evidence syntheses have been around for decades, but the notion of a synthesis that is continuously updated as the evidence evolves, as the issue evolves, as the context evolves, that is a quite new development, made possible in part by new developments in technology, including artificial intelligence. So these syntheses may be updated as the evidence evolves. So we can now have continuous evidence surveillance where we're tracking each new study as it comes online and asking the question, does this change our understanding of this issue? But it can also evolve as the issue and context evolves. So decision makers, including citizen leaders, may say, from our perspective, the issue is now very different from what we first thought it was. We now need to see the evidence described in a way that would match with our new understanding of the issue. Then the final term to understand is evidence synthesis infrastructure. So the first three words before collaborative, evidence synthesis infrastructure. So the Wellcome Trust in its funding announcement described 5 types of infrastructure or 5 types of capabilities needed to do work in this space. So these are the focus of the 5 working groups that have been meeting since January. Demand-side engagement is about getting producers of these syntheses and potential users, including citizen-serving, citizen-led NGOs, working together to understand and meet user needs. So how do we get citizen-serving, citizen-led NGOs at the table to work out which questions to ask, how to answer them, how to present the information in ways that would be useful to them? Data sharing and reusing is about extracting data once from every study or evaluation, conducting a quality assessment once, and reusing the data many times. During COVID, unfortunately, we often had 10s, 20s, 50s of the same review being done in different jurisdictions around the world. Data was being extracted by all of these separate teams, heartbreaking amounts of duplication. We should be able to much more efficiently share and reuse data. The third element of the infrastructure is the safe and responsible use of AI. So there has been an explosion of the use of artificial intelligence tools, but their ability to do different tasks is highly variable. So one of the things that the AI working group is looking at is a living document that for every task related to synthesizing evidence, you would be able to look up its performance metrics. How is it doing compared to humans? They're also looking at things like changing the reporting standards for syntheses. So you have to report on which AI tools you used for which task and what the performance metrics were. So AI can help us a lot do this work better. but it can also introduce all kinds of problems, including worsening the discrimination of the most marginalized in society. So we have to think about how do we safely and responsibly use it. The fourth part of the infrastructure and focus of a working group is methods and process innovation. How can we make synthesis radically more timely, relevant, and affordable? So if you've ever worked with syntheses in the past, you may know that sometimes they can take years to produce. They may not be answering the most important questions from the perspective of citizens. They can cost quite a bit of money to undertake a single review that is not updated. We think now is the time to have radically different models for how these are undertaken and to have citizen partners at the table contributing to these innovations. And the final element of the infrastructure is capacity sharing. So how do we build capabilities for the production and use of evidence synthesis, including with citizen partners at the table? And as I've said a few times now, how do we support a transition in leadership and execution largely to the global south in this space? So my apologies for the jargon and the kind of busy slide, but it's so important that people understand what we mean by an evidence synthesis, why the focus is currently on living versions of them, and why ESIC in particular is focused on 5 types of infrastructure that we think could transform the work that's happening in this space. So I won't go on for too much longer. I just want to hit 4 highlights or 4 updates, and Maureen has alluded to them. But the first one is about the planning process. So we mentioned it began in January. It will culminate in June. This process is being driven primarily by the 5 working groups, one for each of those infrastructure elements, plus a governance planning group. Their next report is due on the 29th of April. So that will open a new consultation window, and I'll come back to some of the other dates that are important to keep in mind. Second thing is, alongside that, we now have the ESIC roadmap writing team, and they are using the principle, work in the open, it makes things better. So all of their documents will be kept live on the ESIC website. You can look at them at any time. They will also periodically have open consultations. They've just had one about who can share examples where the financial case for investments in this area have been developed, who has documented real-world impacts, who are articulate champions in this space, how would we prioritize among different types of infrastructure. Then the third key update is the Cape Town consensus meeting is currently being planned as of, I think, about 10 days ago. They've chosen a name for it. We think this is going to be such a landmark meeting that we wanted a phrase that if you enter it in Google 5 years from now, you would come back to this landmark event and be able to trace its impact through a variety of different ways. So it's going to be called the Cape Town Consensus on Transforming Evidence Synthesis to Improve Lives. A number of citizen partners have already been invited. We're currently about to roll out a set of invitations to people from key interest holder categories. And I recognize a few organizations who have people on the line today who we identified as people we would love to see represented at the Cape Town meeting. So some of you will likely be getting invitations today or tomorrow. And then finally, targeted engagements of representatives from key interest holder categories. So today is our first chance to have a conversation with citizen leaders, people working with citizen-serving, citizen-led NGOs, but we're also working with a number of multilateral organizations, networks of science advisors, a network of evidence synthesizers, a variety of different funder groups. So I won't go through all the acronyms, but what the main point is, we really want to make sure that citizen voices and citizen-serving NGOs' voices are heard alongside these other groups. Couple of quick visuals. Our process, we're using something called the double diamond approach. We have a bit of a variant. It's now a little bit more of a triple diamond. If you've heard of a double diamond approach before, you'll know that it's about forcing yourself to think broadly first and then narrow in first about the problem, and then think broadly about and then narrow in on the solutions that could have the most transformative impacts. We're currently in the second diamond and specifically in stage 3. And as I mentioned before, the reports from stage 3 from each of the groups will be released on the 29th of April. Then, as I also mentioned, we have the ESIC roadmap being written in parallel. Then we'll have the Cape Town meeting, a launch pad for action. So that will then equip all of the funders to go away to decide how to design the funding flows so they get to the right people and help to support this transition in leadership and execution to the Global South. But it will also allow a lot of different groups to immediately start to change their work, regardless of the funding flows that will come in future. So we hope it will be a roadmap that many of us can use to think about how we change our work. So our goal is to develop this roadmap that will lead to this step change improvement. And it's a roadmap that can then be operationalized by what we call peak bodies. So groups like the International Network for Government Science Advice, other groups that bring together a broad variety of interest holders that want to speak with one voice, but also by individual organizations. So this visual is a little bit complicated. It's meant to be a very simple structure, a kind of a platform, columns, a pediment at the top. The infrastructure that we're talking about is the base of this structure. So we have this investment from the Wellcome Trust, £45 million. You'll recognize those 5 areas that we have the working groups. With this infrastructure in place, then other groups can come along and fund these living evidence syntheses on all of the most pressing challenges of our time. We already know a number of funders are ready to move into the funding of these living evidence syntheses, but many more will be coming to the table. We also hope that there will be funding flows going to groups, and many of these could be citizen-led or citizen-serving NGOs who try to provide evidence for different types of decision makers, like citizen-serving NGOs, different sectors in different regions and in different languages. And we hope there will also be funding for that. So Maureen, I'm going to turn it back to you to talk about citizen members' contributions up until now.
Yep, one more slide and then we're going to stop for questions. When I applied and I was fortunate enough to join, I didn't understand that this was a planning phase. So I'll tell you how I interpret it from my citizen perspective and John, you'll correct me if I'm misinterpreting it after 3 months, hopefully not, but we had this, there was this huge announcement from the Wellcome Trust, very exciting that they were going to pour lots of money, lots of funding, they, along with other funders, into really, I'm going to say revolutionizing, because it's really a very brave, bold approach to the current evidence synthesis infrastructure. And the way I understand it now is that they said, yes, we want to give this money and we want to fund this, but you need to spend 6 months with a group of many interest holders and tell us what your proposals are. What do you think the best way to do this is? We don't want to just hand over the money and for you to start working. So it's almost like a scoping review before you actually start your work. That's how I've understood it. That's what that 6-month process is about. And then the funders are going to take this information and then decide where they want to invest their money. So John, is that a pretty simplistic view of it? Is that okay?
No, I think it's a very accurate one. What I've heard some people say is the planning process is about what needs to be funded. Then the funders will go away and decide how to fund it. So they could choose a variety of different ways to get money to the right people. Hopefully the majority of those funds going to the Global South to lead and execute on the work. But yes, it's a 6-month phase to get as many bright brains around the world coming at it from all these different angles to say, this is what would be transformative for us. and then they can go away and decide how it gets funded. But then, as I said before, this is not just in most of our views about funding. This will also just transform a lot of how all of us do our work, regardless of the funding flows.
Okay, that's great. So, thinking back years ago, and John alluded to this earlier, this work would have been done behind closed doors with a select group of people. There's no way that citizen members would have been involved in that process where, but we are. So there are 4 citizen members who sit on either 2 working groups, and then I'm the 4th one who's on the governance planning group, so who've been involved since January. We provide input into all of the working or planning group reports. So there's lots of reports, there's lots of opportunities for input. I attend what they call the co-chairs weekly meetings, and have a standing item where I update what's happening with the citizen members and what we're doing. And we are leading the drafting of a call to action document, and that is going to be circulated to you next week to get some of your feedback on it and your impressions of it. That's where the direct contributions are occurring for now. And our goal is to reach out and to, widen that net and hear from as many people as we can. But that's where we are. And I'm going to tell you that we're a force to reckon with. We've made sure that our contributions are loud and clear, and that we're being heard by the group, and the reception has been very positive. So it's not tokenistic. After being in this world for a long time, I can detect tokenism pretty quickly, and I wouldn't be doing it if it was tokenistic. It definitely isn't tokenistic, and we've had a lot of support. So that's where we are. So I'm going to stop here, just to see, so at this point, if you just have a question about all of the information that John provided, this would be a good time to ask it either in the chat or unmute yourself and ask a question, and then will go and ask you some very direct questions about some of the work that we've been doing and what your insights are on that. So I know it's a lot of information. I'm just hoping that it was enough to be able to allow you to contribute meaningfully to this planning phase of the work. So, any questions? Who's going to be the first? Violet, you've unmuted.
Yes, I have, and thanks a lot. I want to go to that slide that had it's called the double diamond. Okay. And on that graphic, there is what we are, the question, the first part, what is the problem? Of course, my question to you guys is, who was defining the problem? From whose perspective was this problem being defined? That's one. And of course, what is the end game? The reason I ask that—
They're great questions.
Yeah, the reason I ask that, I'm wearing a Twaweza hat, where we have been in the business of evidence generation, and we basically collect citizens' experiences, their opinions, and their views on, the development challenges that they're interacting with and how they are governed. And so I'm trying to understand, in this context, what was happening, where is this coming from, and what is the end game, and what value would an organization like Twaweza add to this process? I have colleagues on the call as well.
Thank you. John's got two slides coming up talking about those problems. So I think we're going to answer that question, but all I'm going to say, Violet, is that before this initiative, there was a global commission on evidence to address societal challenges. And that commission uncovered a lot of these problems and really took a good look at the use of evidence. So I think that a lot of that groundwork was done by the Global Commission, and all of the inputs that we received in that Global Commission. The third objective was the use of evidence in everyday life. And we ran a webinar series of 4 webinars with that and spoke to a lot of people then, and a lot of these issues came up. So I don't know, John, it might be good to just put up those 2 slides now where you do talk about the problems, and then maybe you can we can tackle the end game. The end game for me is a massive transformation in the system, but I am an optimist, so I'm going to let John put those slides up, and maybe that's going to help too. So, over
And
to you,
Maureen,
John.
can you see the slide about the problem? Maureen? No? Oh, you can. Sorry, I couldn't see you. I had to take it down because I couldn't
Okay,
see
it was
your,
there and then it's gone,
okay,
but
yeah, I
okay.
took it down because I didn't hear your voice, so I thought there was a
Okay.
problem. Just give me a sec. And as soon as I do this, I'll also in part answer Violet's question. So Violet, from whose perspective, each of these working groups were comprised of a very diverse group of people. So as you heard from Maureen say, there were people from citizen-serving NGOs, citizen-led NGOs, including everyday citizens like Maureen. There were evidence intermediaries whose job is to, when they get a call and are told, you have 2 business days to tell us what do we know about this topic because the minister is going to make a decision. We had other groups who primarily serve the needs of, let's say, parents and educators in the education system. So it was, each group is incredibly heterogeneous from the perspective of their interest holder category, but also what part of the world they're in and so far and so on. And then they had their own consultations with diverse groups. So it has been, as much as people could do in a limited period of time, an effort to canvass a very not diffuse, a very diverse group of people's views about the problem. And then the other point, I'll just allude to the end game piece. So one way that an organization like yours may benefit is the excellent work that you are generating, the excellent evidence you're generating with everyday people's views and experiences. How can this infrastructure make sure that those insights get captured in future when people are synthesizing what we've learned from around the world? So often the types of evidence that you're talking about don't get synthesized effectively, and the world is worse off for not having those included in evidence syntheses. Another way that an organization like yours could benefit is your organization may generate a lot of evidence about where people think some of the key problems are, but there may be evidence from jurisdictions other than Uganda, but similar to Uganda, that may have shed light on some of the drivers of those problems that have not yet been explored in Uganda, or some of the solutions, or some of the ways to implement solutions in ways that reach the people who most need them. So if you're trying to make a difference in decision making, your evidence could then be put alongside some of these other forms of evidence from other contexts to come up with a solution that makes sense for the Uganda context. So that's a quick set of reactions to the endgame question. On this slide, you'll see some of the thinking that has come out about the problem. So one expression of it is citizens aren't benefiting from efforts to put evidence at the center of everyday life. So very hard for citizens to find unbiased sources of information to judge what others are claiming. Fluoridation of the water helps or doesn't help. Making evidence available to citizens when they are making decisions, engaging citizens in asking questions and answering them, like the work of Violet and her team, making evidence-based choices the default or easy option. So there are a lot of ways that everyday decisions taken by everyday people could have evidence underpinning part of what is being presented to them, but very often that is not the case. Some of the other ways that the problem's been talked about is people who work as intermediaries between evidence producers and then decision makers, so we call them evidence intermediaries, they don't have access to these continuously updated summaries of what we've learned from around the world. So if they get a question, tell us what we know in 3 business days, relevant to the Colombian context, what we have learned from Colombia, but also what we've learned from other countries around the world that share similar contexts and may be focused on similar priority groups. How do we put those things side by side? So we have the best local evidence, but we also have insights from other parts of the world that we can learn from. And then finally, another expression of the problem that has come up so far is that those commissioning or producing evidence syntheses have been chasing fragments of what we've needed. So little pieces of the infrastructure, small scale production, heartbreaking amounts of duplication, one-off use of AI tools with a lot of uncertainty about whether they're being used safely and responsibly. So this is a way to provide a more robust infrastructure underpinning this kind of work. And then some of the ideas from a solutions perspective, if you're a busy government policymaker or running a citizen-serving NGO, what might matter to you the most is you would have at your fingertips actionable insights. What have we learned from around the world, particularly for groups and contexts relevant to you? So imagine being able to very quickly get highly reliable insights about what we have learned with that equity dimension of how do the findings vary by groups and contexts. For people who do the more technical work behind the scenes, responding to requests from citizen-serving NGOs, government policymakers, and others, in future, here the end game would be they would have data on tap from these living evidence syntheses. So a question comes in, rather than start with a clean slate, trying to find all the studies that have looked at citizens' views and experiences, they would have all the data already extracted from the studies and could provide a synopsis of here's what we have learned that we think is relevant to the Ugandan context, which can then be put alongside the local evidence from Uganda. And part of what the solution could look like for research funders is feedback loops that reduce research waste. So we have a lot of research waste that happens where people are answering questions that have been answered time and time and time again in very similar contexts, or they're answering the question without an approach that is the best match to the question. So if your question is about opinions or views, then it may be qualitative research or surveys. But if it's questions of benefits and harms, then there would be other approaches that would add the most value. So another way that the solutions could appear is by reductions in research waste. So I don't know, Violet, if that answered your question directly, but coming back to the 2 questions in a nutshell, who articulated the problem? Incredibly diverse people from around the globe who were selected because they brought very diverse perspectives. But we're not convinced it's all right. And that's why we need to hear from citizen leaders, citizen-serving NGOs, so that it is your expression of the problem. And then what is the end game? This will never replace the excellent work you do in Uganda. We hope it will surface your excellent work so others around the globe can learn from it. And we hope it will complement your work so that people will have not just the Uganda evidence, but evidence from other contexts and from other groups that may be similar to the groups that you're focused on. So it's a complement as well to what you're doing. So Maureen, I'll turn it back to you. I think you have 2 final slides.
Yep. Thanks, John. But before I go there, that was a great question, Violet. Any other questions before I wrap it up with a few more slides? Anybody else? I saw some in the chat. I tried to answer. Jack was asking about project in right methods. So there is a methods working group, and we have met with them as citizen leaders to make sure that in their report was also dealing with co-production of evidence synthesis and the methods involved in that. So and if that's Jack, if that's a particular area of interest, you can go on the ESIC website and go and comment directly on that working group. So if you're here and you've got an area that you're particularly interested in, there's nothing that precludes you from going to comment on those working reports too. We encourage you to bring those citizen perspectives there also. So that's really important. I put the link in there.
Oh, you did. Great.
Also,
Super.
yeah,
That's why I went to that webpage. But if you have
yeah,
the
I
link
can
in
put
the
it in the
chat
chat
box,
too,
that's
though.
great.
I didn't put it in the chat box, but I
Okay.
can do that. I can do that now. That's a good idea. So yes, so there are all these different working group reports which you can also contribute to, and we would really encourage you to do that, because you know we have different areas maybe within this project that we're specifically interested in. So I think that would be really interesting. I'm trying to get my chat box got locked. Okay, here we go.
There is a comment from James Maureen.
Yes, what is it?
It's quite long. I can't
yes.
summarize it.
Right, a little bit about.
I wish you could speak to it before you get into the next.
Okay.
Your next slide.
Take a look at it. Do you see it, John, at 9:53? Can you look in the chat too? So
I see Jack's.
Yes.
James, yeah, has been active. Yeah, so, you know, I think this notion of citizen science, if I'm understanding James correctly, that is very much, you know, one of the key considerations. How do we make citizen science more visible among the sources of information that are influencing decision makers, including at the highest level? So our hope is that these evidence syntheses will in future increasingly draw on that kind of citizen science that it sounds like your organization, James, and your organization, Violet, is at the leading edge of. So this will be a way to surface that science in a way that gets captured in syntheses so others around the globe can learn from it. And then, as I mentioned before, it will also complement it, because fantastic that you have that citizen collected, citizen generated evidence. Very often, to make tough decisions, people need many forms of information. So you would want that evidence from Uganda, from across Africa, but it's also sometimes helpful to know, well, what have we learned from other jurisdictions around the world that may be relevant to our context? So ESIC will do both. It will, we hope, surface your excellent work and put it alongside others in syntheses, but it will also complement your work by giving people insights from other parts of the world that would complement the work that you're doing locally.
Okay, we're about ready to wrap up. So what we'll do is we'll encourage people who join webinar 2 and webinar 3 to listen to this webinar, where we basically had to set the scene, and we didn't have a lot of opportunities to listen to you, though lots of really good engagement in the chat and a few really good questions. That's not going to set the tone. That's not how we're going to run the other webinars. It really will be much more opportunities to listen to you. But next week you will receive a document. I think right now it's at about 5 pages. I'm trying to shorten it. That is a call to action, and there'll be a survey with it for us to get some feedback from you. And then it'll also be discussed at webinar 2 and webinar 3. And it's divided into 4 sections, where there's an introduction, where the basic premise is that citizen engagement is vital to the future success of an evidence ecosystem. Then there's a section on challenges. We'd love to get your feedback on that. There's a statement of values and principles. Oh yeah, it's nice to say you're going to do citizen engagement in the evidence ecosystem. What are the values and principles that underpin that? And then finally, there are 4 calls to action. And so we're looking forward to getting your feedback on that in preparation for our second webinar. Any comments that you have would be really helpful. We look forward to hearing from you and really to have a much more robust discussion where we can listen to each other. And we will definitely encourage people to come to listen to this recording so that we don't have to do this again. Just do like a 5-minute introduction and then jump right in. But we felt that we needed to kind of, explain the project so that people could participate. So you can go to the next slide, John. So the survey's coming next week. If you signed up for this, we'll email it to you directly. We encourage you to spread the word and circulate the survey in your networks. And it'll be open until the 14th of May. So it's not you'll have time to circulate it and think about, responding to it. Our next webinar will be on the 21st of May. So by then we'll have received some feedback also. And that's really going to be to discuss the key messages that we'd like to contribute to the roadmap. We'll have a little bit more information about the roadmap. To me, it's still kind of trying to figure that one out. So we'll figure that out alongside with you what that roadmap might look like. And then the third webinar would be just before the consensus meeting, and that would be the 19th of June, and that'll be really to bring those key messages. So I thank you so much for taking your time from your busy lives and schedules to attend today. I often refer to it as a journey. There's been a lot of bumps along the way, but basically we're on this journey, and we're really hoping to have this transformative impact on the evidence and structure, and want to do that alongside with all of your insights too. So John, any final words?
No, thank you very much, Maureen. And again, as Maureen indicated, in the future webinars, we're really hoping to spend the majority of the time hearing from all of you. This is, we think, a really unique opportunity to have people shape these major new investments, shape the future of how so many of us do our work. And we really need to make sure that the voices of citizen-serving, citizen-led NGOs and citizen leaders are front and center in this conversation. So they shape our understanding of the problem, to Violet's point, and they shape what the future looks like in terms of the end goal and the impacts on the ground. So this is a really great opportunity for all of you to help shape this.
So thank you, everyone, and we will see you. We'll look forward to your contributions via the survey, and then hope to see you in May. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.